Hey, good evening. Sorry for this late post here. I was in the middle of my floor doing some exercises, and I was like, "What is something I was supposed to do?" And then I realized I hadn't done the video yet. So my sincerest apologies to you. I had everything all mapped out and ready to go, and just forgot the all-important final task of actually recording it. So here we are. We are at week 4. As I indicated earlier, I'm going to try to get all of everything graded this week, and for your Project 1 and process memos, and get that information back to you. So I'm working on that. So we're going to move ahead into Project 2, which is our genre analysis. So I'm going to minimize myself here, and so I've got the assignment prompt here for the Project 2 folder, and what we're going to really try to do is kind of really get into the identification, analysis, and reflection of the two papers, the two articles for this particular paper. So I'll start off by saying one thing I would like you to really concentrate on, whatever article you chose from the writing studies, right, from the readings that you wrote about in your blog post would be quote-unquote my discourse community, right? So the writing studies community. And then you would have your discourse community, the article that you selected and that you wrote about, that you summarized in blog post number 2. So that is what we're comparing. That's what your genre analysis will be, comparing those two articles. So if you have any questions about that, just let me know. So you should have 3 sections. So if you've had a chance to look at the sample papers that I posted this morning, you'll notice that all 3 of those, first and foremost, they're all excellent examples, and they are all written very specifically addressing the identification section here, the analysis section, and the reflection section. So not that you can't read this, but I do want to point out that when you identify the major conventions found in the peer-reviewed articles you have selected, here are some questions for you to think about. That does not mean that these are the only questions. What kinds of things are you noticing that you can identify that are what we would call typified rhetorical actions or rhetorical moves, or things that you are seeing happen in your particular article, in your discourse community article, compared to my discourse community or the writing studies article? Are there some similarities, differences, variances? And then here are some questions for you to think about. The interesting section, what sections are most extensively written about, especially for you those in the sciences. This might be the discussion section, it might be the methods section, or some other section that they have spent more time on. So once you identify those things, you move into a section for analysis. And this is where you're going to really spend some time talking about how these values, how do they coincide with the goals that you identified in your Project 1 research guide. And so then you might ask yourself, as this indicates here, what do the different citation styles suggest? Why or what do you think the different or lack of sections, order of sections, or size of sections indicate about the discourse community? And what that means is really kind of think about how does that go towards really supporting the, the overall goals and aims of your discourse community. And then there's the other questions here that I would definitely pay attention to. And your reflection, this is what have you learned from this? What can you begin to say about your discourse community after having completed your analysis? How do genres, in this case the peer-reviewed article, because that is where we are kind of honing in right now, help shape the values, goals, and agenda of discourse communities in general, more specifically yours? And how do you notice that they compare differently to the writing studies? What might be some assumptions? What are some things you can suggest about those? And while this is a limited sample size, what have you learned about the discourse community and professional genres? How are they similar? How are they different? This is kind of a, for lack of a better term, analysis a lot of times, and we lead into reflection. It's kind of we're doing some comparing and contrasting, and really asking ourselves some how and why questions. Those are the really key things you want to think about when writing this paper. Okay, the minimum requirements, 4 to 5 pages, double-spaced. And I do definitely want you to have 3 sections minimum: identification, analysis, and reflection over the 2 peer-reviewed journal articles, the 2 that you wrote for blog post number 2. And then if your discourse community is in MLA style, write in MLA style. If your discourse community is APA style, write your genre analysis and APA style. If it's Chicago or other, then I would expect that you would write in that as well. Okay, so we can go down in here into week 4 activities, which I'm sure that you have already done. Watch the week 4 video. Yay! Read the following. Chapter 6, rhetorically reading, tracking, and evaluating sources. It's kind of give you some good background information how to read these sources, maybe a little more analytically or evaluatively. Excuse me. And the student sample text for Project 2, which I posted below. And then you'll have a draft by Friday night for peer review. We're going to do a discussion board, and I will link that below once I set up that, now that we have access to Blackboard. And then I will ask you to read some of your peers' drafts. It says in an assigned folder. This particular Blackboard system doesn't have the assigned folder, so we'll have some other. I'll have some other specific directions for you on that by Friday. So, looking forward, between now and Friday, you want to have your draft. So, when you're thinking about putting your draft together, I've already pulled up a couple of the ones. So, this is genre analysis sample 1, and obviously written in APA format. And so we've got the title page, then we have the abstract page, and the abstract is an abstract of what is forthcoming. And then you'll notice right off the bat here that this particular student starts right off with the identification section. So you can pull in some of your summary, and then you really want to go into identifying, like the student does right here. Title, authors, journal article, issue number is clearly printed, presented, APA format, third person versus first person. So he's already, he or she's already starting to make some identification, something that's very specific about his article, his discourse community, and then moves into this particular one is over the Wordle article, Identity, Authority, and Learning to Write. Obviously notices the MLA format, notices the first person, and things of this nature and how it's written and constructed. So this is literally identifying the rhetorical features of this particular article. And then into analysis. And this should be the bulk of your paper, would be the analysis section. And this is where you will kind of start to begin the compare and contrast and answer some of those how and why questions. Is why is one an APA format? Why is one an MLA format? Why is one maybe written, has a section that's written more about than the other one, and the purposes and the goals of that section. So, and then lastly, the reflection, and then student here in analyzing the 2 articles, I've learned a tremendous amount about how the genre supports goals and values. Then he goes into very specific detail about the differences. I like I want to point out here that while on the article by Wordle, I learned that the method of storytelling can put the reader directly into the author's shoes to help its members incorporate real-life scenarios. Now, what I find interesting about that is something that's kind of different in our discourse community is a lot of times there'll be those real-life scenarios, maybe some storytelling as he or she is interpreting it, and then speaking to the significance and how it contrasts with the civil engineering, in this particular case, discourse community. And then we have, in this case, would be a bibliography. And then quickly, to kind of demonstrate perhaps a different format, here we have an MLA one, genre analysis. This particular student opted to write an introduction, which is perfectly fine, to kind of give some sort of context. And then we noticed something very similar and something that I want you to kind of see, and that is the identification section. All right, and so here we start to identify, similar to APA format, and then moving into keywords are pivotal, right? And so this student is finally starting to realize that this particular discourse community that she's writing or she is writing to is in the MRAD format, and so through this process, this student learned to start writing her papers in APA. And then, as you can see right here on the contrast, or in contrast to, then here is the writing studies. And so it's starting to kind of start to develop and understand the different styles that are being used for this genre analysis. And then we have the analysis section, and this student does a really good job of going into great detail about and contrasting the differences, especially as to why particular methods were used in one versus the other. And then, of course, the reflection section. And that's where you will really explain in detail those items that you learn and how those relate back to the goals of your discourse community and what and their aims. Okay, and then we have the Works Cited page. So that's kind of a rundown of the, or is a rundown of the Project 2, and your draft to be as complete as possible. And while there will be some peer review this particular weekend, now that Blackboard is back working, we'll do that through a discussion board post, as I said, and I'll explain all that in a forthcoming video. And then you'll have till Sunday. And so while you are looking at drafts, I want you to be able to read. We'll probably read somewhere around 3 to 4 of your peers' drafts and get an idea of how others are approaching it, right? We can learn a lot when we're exposed to other papers and provide, excuse me, provide some feedback to your fellow peers, and then I will provide you with some instructions as far as how to do that between now and I'll try to get that done by Wednesday so that you have that for those of you who want to get it accomplished a little ahead of time or whatever. So, all right, that does it for this video. Sorry for the length of this one. If you do have any questions or if there's anything I can do to help you, please do let me know. Send me an email. You can request to meet with me right here on campus. If you're not on campus and you want to Skype in or you want to do some sort of other technological virtual meeting, if you will, I'm more than happy to do anything to help you out. So, so goodbye for now. Have a great week, and I will talk to you very soon.